Good day, people. So today I am going to be showing you how to set up a Terraria server for multiplayer. This is for PC 1.3 onward. I'm going to cover Steam and dedicated, so you have different options. I'm going to do actually 5 different ways to set up a server, and I'm going to actually include Windows, Mac, and Linux versions. So as you can see, I'm actually showing you my outline here. I'm going to start with the easiest versions, the easiest ways of setting up a server for Terraria, and we'll move onward from there. So, easiest way obviously is host and play. Basically, you just start up Terraria, and once you get in the game, you go to multiplayer, and you just hit host and play, choose your world, and off you go. Only problem with that is it only works as long as you're still in the game. So that's why we have dedicated servers. And Terraria, actually, the game comes with some batch files. So if you've got the Steam version, you'll want to go into your Steam folder and then go to steamapps and then comment and then Terraria, and you'll get this list of files here. If you've got another version, it will still give you at least one batch file, but there is Steam integration. So if you use the Steam integration, then that means that people can join you directly through Steam. You just start up your server, and they'll be able to join that directly. You've got one here. You've got batch file, start server, Steam, friends, and that will just, these are just batch files. You can actually look at them and edit and see what they're doing. It's just starting the Terraria server with the Steam parameter to say Steam integration is enabled. Sets up a lobby for your friends if you use the friends one, or it'll set up a private one, so it won't be so visible if you use the private one. Either way, it's going to work. You will need Steam to be running, or else it will give you an error message. So if you have Steam running, you can use these, and that'll enable them to join that way. They can also join by IP if you set that up. So if you just use the start server, which you'll also have, I did confirm this on, I've got a GOG DRM free version that I do own as well. I checked it on another machine. If you just use the regular start server, similar idea, and this is what you're going to get when you run one of these batch files. This is the dedicated server. It's a console app, basically. It'll give you a list of the worlds that you have on the machine you're running it on. You can also push N to create a new world, and basically you just choose the world you want, or you push N and go through the steps to create a new one. And then it's going to give you some other options, so you can set the maximum number of players who are able to join. The server port defaults to 7777, 47s. It will use upnp automatic port forwarding if your network and your router support that. So then hopefully you won't need to worry about that. But if people can't join by the address, then you may need to get into port forwarding. I'm not going to go into those details, but there you go. There's the option to automatically forward the port, and that's what that means. It's UPnP. You can also set a password. So if you don't want everybody to be able to just join at will, if you want, to keep it closed, then you can set a password and keep that password private, and then it's going to go through and it's going to set it up. And once it says listening here, that means your server is up and running. So once you'll need to leave that running for people to be able to play, basically. And when you're done with that, if you're done with that, then you can just close it down. So that's your basic batch files using the included files. Now, if you want to run this maybe on a spare machine, or you have a hosted environment, you're going to need the dedicated server files, but you might not have the game installed. So you can actually go to terraria.org. And if you scroll to the bottom here, hidden at the very bottom, there's this little link for dedicated server. And that is going to give you this zip file right here. And this will give you the server files, which you can use on any other machine. And it actually includes files for Linux, Mac, and Windows. So you just need to go into the zip. You don't need to necessarily extract the whole thing. You'll need the files from whichever folder applies to whichever platform you want to run it on. So for Windows, it's relatively simple because it's native to Windows, actually. And again, it gives you that batch file, and you can basically just do that. You'll notice also there's this server config file. That includes, you can actually edit this, and obviously you'll need to extract it first. If you're using the dedicated server zip file, you'll need to extract this to a folder. Windows, it's just like right-click and, well, actually, probably you want to do a Control-A, select all, and a copy, and just put those in another folder wherever you want to install it. But then you can edit the server config, and there's various things you can put in here. You can set these things to default, max players and port and stuff, so that it doesn't ask you every time. And yeah, there's various things that you can do in there. But that'll get you the files if you want to run it on another machine where you don't have the game installed. Or you just want to install it in a different folder maybe. But that's an option there as well. So that's the official dedicated server. Again, great if you have a spare machine or something. And yeah, you just go to terraria.org and download a dedicated server at the bottom. Now, if you want to do like a public server, or you want to get into like permissions and have people allowed to do certain things and people not allowed to do certain things and stuff like that, there's this thing called TShock. And that's basically an advanced server for Terraria, and that's what you will find on most of the public servers, actually. And what I used actually for my briefly running fan server as well. So this is TShock, and it's at tshock.co. If you want to get into advanced stuff, this is what you're going to want to use. Again, it allows you to set permissions. You should know how to use the command line if you're going to run the TShock server. And if you're going to do a public server, you're going to want to secure your server. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how to run TShock, because really you need to spend some time and understand what you're doing before you get into this. It does not include Mac or Linux binaries. You'll need to install the Mono package, which, you know, if you're going to do this, hopefully you might have heard of that. It's to run .NET stuff on other platforms other than Windows, because .NET, which Terraria was created in, is a Windows thing originally. So you'll need to install Mono, and you may need to play around with which version of Mono you have installed, because I needed to try a couple different versions myself to get that working. But you can go to tshock.co, hit downloads here, and oops, you'll find it under releases. And yeah, it's just a zip file. Again, I've got that over here, and I can show you what's in it. That's just basically it. It's kind of similar to the Windows Terraria server files, but you'll notice there's server plugins, and you can get plugins for TShock as well to modify the game, essentially, and to give you more options and so on. So that's what TShock is all about. And yeah, that's what I use for my public server, and why you had to register accounts and stuff like that. Basically, when you set up TShock, it will initially require you actually to register a super admin account. You'll need to actually join the game once you have the server up and running with whatever player you want to use as your super admin player, and register an account. That account will have all the privileges and will bypass, you know, restrictions that would be applied to other players. Will have all permissions. So you may also want to create another regular player or use another regular player and register a regular account if you just want to have a regular player. I do have some notes here on TShock permissions as well, and I'll get to Linux and Mac in a second, by the way. But yeah, you're going to need to know this stuff a little if you're going to use a TShock server. You'll need to be able to add groups and add permissions to groups. So the command to add a group is /group add group name. So if you're in the game, you can actually do this in text chat if you have your super admin or another user that has the permissions to do it. /group add the group name, and if you want to add permissions to that group, it's /group add perm for add permissions. So /group add perm, the group name, and the permission you want to add. You can also add users to a group, /user group, and then the username, and then the group name. And these are just an example of a few of the permissions that you might want to add. So it would be like /group add perm, the group name, and then like tshock.admin. Whichever of these are some that I had to use myself, but there's lots of other permissions. For example, TShock, your regular users are not actually allowed to summon bosses with the regular boss summoning items, like, you know, the suspicious looking eye and so on, unless you give them permission to do that. So you're going to need to spend some time and understand what you're doing before you get into TShock. It does have a bit of a learning curve. There is a guide here, and there are others, how to host TShock on Linux that will walk you through some of those steps, how to install Mono and so on. But again, you're going to need to know what you're doing to be successful at this, how to set permissions and all that stuff. So There's also a basic guide on the official Terraria wiki, setting up a Terraria server, which will guide you through some of those server config options and so on, regardless of which way you're going to go with it. And yeah, without further ado, let's get over to Mac and Linux. So if you're on Mac, oh, and I need to put in my password because I left this sitting here a while. All right, so if you're on Mac, you're going to need to, first of all, get to your Terraria folder, which you can actually do a go and go to folder, or you can open your command line if you're more happy with that. Go to folder, and this is the folder you're going to need to get to locate your Steam stuff. So it's in users, and then test is actually just my username. So it's going to be users, your username, library, application support. So yeah, it's a little more difficult, obviously, than on Windows. You're going to open that, and in here you'll find your Steam folder, and in there you'll find your Steam apps, and in there you'll find your common, and then Terraria, and you're going to see this, and you're like, where's the server, right? So you right-click on your Terraria application and show package contents, and then you go into the contents, and then you go into macOS, and here you have your server. So easy version is that you can actually just right-click on Terraria server and open with terminal, and that will give you basically what you need to do. I have that. If you want to do it by terminal, here's where you're going to go. Again, users, your username, library, application support, Steam, Steam apps, common, Terraria, Terraria.app, contents, macOS. So you can CD to that, or one at a time. You can get there, and that'll get you there as well. And that way you can use command line options, or you can create a script over here if you know what you're doing with that stuff. But basically, you can just right-click, open with terminal, and that'll start up the server. And again, at that point, you're going to get the same options. If you have any worlds, you can choose that number world to start with, or you can push N to create a new world. And so yeah, it works the same as the Windows version, gives you the same options, and it's just gonna fire up, and it's gonna give you, wait a second there to finish starting the server, and there you go. Same idea, it's just, Mac likes the white background, but listening on port tells you that it's up and running, and your server sits there until you, in this case, you're going to want to exit. Type in exit, push enter, and that's how you're going to exit that. Because the Windows version, you can actually shut it down at any time, apparently. It acts a little different here. It'll tell you you don't probably want to just terminate it. You want to exit properly. But you can create a script to have the restart and stuff that the Windows batch file automatically adds. So yeah, that's it on Mac more or less, and of course you can get into TShock and stuff, and the dedicated server from the Terraria.org will work essentially the same as the installed game files that you found in that location. So you can also just download the dedicated server from the website as I showed you, extract that to a folder, and run it in a similar manner from there. So off to Linux. So basically this is where you're going to find Steam and your Steam installed applications. If you're on Linux, if you open your home folder, you're going to be at home/your username, and the folder that Steam is hidden in sort of on Linux is called .steam. You'll probably need to add that in your address bar. You put in a dot after the slash and S for Steam, and you'll see it there. So again, Steam, and then once you go into .steam, you've got Steam, and then Steam apps, and then common, and Terraria, if you've got it installed via Steam. Again, you can also download the dedicated server and extract the Linux files to an appropriate folder, and you'll have basically the same stuff from there to run it with. So this actually comes with a script. So you can, this should be enabled. You'll want to check your permissions on the properties. It should be enabled already to run as a program. But on this version, depends again on your GUI, which GUI you're using. Mine only had open with mousepad or open with other application. So I chose open with other application and the terminal. So now that's in here. But you'll want to open that with your terminal. And again, that's the script that will set things appropriately to get it running. The actual binaries are .bin.x86 and .bin.x8664, but there's a script, at least on this one, that will more or less get you going. And once you're going, it's the same idea again. Just choose the world or create a new one and set the options, and bam, it's going to do its little thing to start up the server, and you're going to be up and running. So as far as I can tell, the Steam integration, there's obviously no like script or batch file to include the Steam integration on Mac and Linux, unfortunately. You may be able to do that by the command line with the -steam parameter and the -lobby. I'll just show you that quickly, actually, where to find that in the, or what that actually says in these batch files. I don't know if it'll work if you have the Steam client running on Mac or Linux, but you can try it if you want to. You just run the, in this case, it'll be your other one here, your script or your Mac binary, and you just add the -steam and -lobby and either friends or private to the command line, and I can't tell you whether that will or will not work. I didn't want to take the time to try to figure that out. So you can give it a shot if you like, but that's the idea. And yeah, that's how you run a server for Terraria a bunch of different ways. There's also, as I say, I'm going to include that wiki link. I'll include these other things that I brought up here. Terraria.org to get the dedicated server, TShock.co to get the TShock, and that little guide if you want to get into TShock. There's also a getting started with TShock here, which you can get the permissions. There's a permissions list, so you can find all the permissions you might need in there as well. And the more general guide for setting up a Terraria server on the official Terraria wiki. So I'll include all those links, and hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.